started with the Resident Evil series. It is a stupid series that just refuses to die. It's got 5 movies with a 6th on the way, 2 CG movies, 7 novels, numerous comic books, 6 main games, oh, and don't get me started on the spin-offs. How can a series this gigantic come from a game this bad?
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
Excuse me?
Amy?
I heard Resident Evil and I came running.
Wait, hold on. You actually like Resident Evil?
It's not all bad.
The only game worth a damn is Resident Evil 4.
Every series has its flaws. I'm pretty sure you've played nothing except Resident Evil 4, am I right? Oh.
Resident Evil 5 was announced at E3 2005, the same year Resident Evil 4 was released. It was going to be the first next-gen Resident Evil game and eventually became Capcom's most ambitious title to date. It took a full 4 years for the game to even be realized and became the first Resident Evil game to get a multi-platform launch.
Ahem.
You're still here?
I'm here to make sure you don't screw anything up.
So what you're saying is you want to do a co-op review?
This is a co-op focused game.
True. Well, let's get started.
This is Resident Evil 5.
It has been 5 years since the end of Resident Evil 4, and Chris Redfield feels that it's time for him to become the starring character of the series again.
It's a world without the Umbrella Corporation, and now most of their bioweapons are on the black market. Enter the DSAA, a group whose sole purpose is to fight against bioterrorism.
Chris meets up with Sheva, a local to this part of Africa, to investigate a man named Irving, who is known to be smuggling bioweapons into the area. He is also determined to find his old partner, Jill, who died in between games
DLC.
in a fight with Wesker.
Their quest eventually leads them to find Tricell, another group that had deep ties to the Umbrella Corporation. It's up to Chris and Sheva to discover Jill's true fate and discover who's behind the biothreat in Africa.
It's Wesker.
Leo?
What? It's obvious! The way the story's told shows that Jill and Wesker supposedly died together. The instant Jill is seen alive at the very beginning, our minds instantly assume that Wesker survived too. It's like how the twist of Super Mario Sunshine was the fact that Bowser was the main villain. We all saw it coming.
Well, Wesker has been the major villain for most of the series, and he's probably the strongest one that they've got to offer. I mean, you got a good villain, don't change it. Hell, Sonic the Hedgehog has had the same villain since 1991.
That doesn't stop him from introducing Sheva into the series. She's honestly one of the most bland characters in this game. She's supposed to be a way for newcomers to be explained the events of the series. But I never care about her. With Chris, I feel connected to his story. I love following him. I feel invested in his quest to find Jill. I feel his motivation to stop Wesker. Sheva, however, I don't give a damn shit about. In the entire game, I felt that she only had a single scene of development.
My parents were involved in an accident caused by a pharmaceutical company when I was young.
Umbrella?
Yes. I only found out later that the accident was to cover up the manufacturing of biological weapons for terrorists. They were using Africa as a test bed for their experiments. Bioweapons were responsible for the deaths of my parents. And someone has to pay for that.
Sheva Alomar was a new character introduced into the Resident Evil franchise, beginning with Resident Evil 5. Chris and Wesker have been developing their relationship since the beginning of Resident Evil, so most of the game does focus around their relationship anyway. Most of the game's characters actually exist to die. Irving, Excella, and, as we've come to know from Capcom, anybody piloting a helicopter.
The problem this game has, that many co-op focused games have, is the fact that since the game is co-op, 2 characters are constantly needed from a gameplay perspective. I never feel like Chris or Sheva are in any real danger, because the game itself constantly needs those 2 as playable characters. Games like Gears of War get around this by constantly having 4 characters in your squad, but only making 2 playable.
But there is a lot of stuff in this game that does build onto the Resident Evil lore, like during the loading screens when you can find out more about the viruses and the history of Umbrella. And even a look at Spencer, a character that has only ever been referenced in the series. And even if you don't care about the lore of the series, the self-contained story itself is pretty good. You don't need the other games to follow it, and it's a very exciting story to follow. Well... The last half of the story is pretty interesting. You spend most of the first half looking for this guy named Irving, and then, when you finally kill him, the game picks up where you find Jill and Wesker in this big giant fighting showdown. And then it becomes this really big personal mess that Chris has to figure out for himself.
The second half of the game has all the awesome plot twists, excitement, and backstory that we wanted. But before that, the game moves at a snail's pace, just barely giving you an excuse to go from set piece to set piece in this so-called quest to find Irving. And the second half of the story, I actually really enjoy. It's just getting there that's the problem. You know what I loved about Resident Evil 4? The dark atmosphere, the tense action, the claustrophobic environments. That's why I'm glad Resident Evil 5 is full of super wide open, bright areas.
Yeah, that's where this game really drops the ball. Resident Evil gives off a dark atmospheric vibe to make you feel hopeless and scared, which makes me really confused as to why they went with this design choice. The entire game takes place during the day, until the end of the game, which causes everything to be very brightly lit. Therefore, to me, it did feel like it was Resident Evil.
A majority of the game also takes place outside, which makes me feel super safe when I'm swarmed with zombies.
Majini.
Oh, do you really care? When I was swarmed in Resident Evil 4, I felt helpless. Here I can clearly see everything and find good places to hide. Rarely did I ever feel like I needed to run away. But when the game does get claustrophobic, it really does it well. My favorite part was the cramped dark cave that you have to walk through. Enemies keep popping up everywhere, and the only visibility you have is a flashlight that's being held up by one of the players.
And admit it, you like the cutscenes.
The cutscenes themselves look very nice, and they're very well animated and paced. They are full of really stupid action and destruction.
It's like watching a Resident Evil movie, only not shitty. But my only problem is the colors. They seemed a bit washed out in the entire game. It's all just this hue of these weird brown and yellow filters.
The voice acting is also very solid across the entire cast. My favorite actors being Roger Craig Smith and DC Douglas.
Plans are finished, Wesker.
There's no way out this time.
Don't you two ever tire of failing in your mission?
And the soundtrack.
Forgettable.
Mostly. Not many of them really stick out to me. They mostly sound like background music. But one I will not forget. At the end of Chapter 5-3, right after you free Jill from her mind-controlling breast brooch thing, there's this awesome track that they play. I even have it on my iPod. Like, seriously, no joke, this song.
My biggest complaint about this is that it just doesn't feel like Resident Evil. It's bright and open, and even the enemy designs aren't that memorable.
The Lickers deserve special mention. Those things are absolutely terrifying, but every boss doesn't really stick out to me like they did in RE4, and are actually the same for the most part. I mean, you fight Wesker nearly 3 separate times in the game, and he's still Wesker.
And that leads us into...
I swear to God if you complain about this.
What's to complain about? It's largely unchanged from RE4.
Oh good. Resident Evil 4 was the game that kind of started the whole over-the-shoulder third-person shooter element. By holding down the aim button, it takes you into an aim mode that allows your character to shoot or melee the enemies. While aiming though, you cannot move at all.
And there's the problem. This game follows Resident Evil 4 down to a T. It is the exact same control scheme. But Resident Evil 4 wanted you to still feel helpless. Ammo was usually scarce, and every time you got some, you savored it. But after the first few chapters, ammo becomes plentiful. The further you go, the less of a survival horror game it is, and more of a basic action game that it becomes.
Well, what's wrong with that?
How about the fact that you find out the control scheme's awful?
What are you talking about? Resident Evil 4 had me on my toes the entire first time I played through the game.
That's because in Resident Evil 4 it knew what it wanted to be. As a claustrophobic survival horror game, this kind of control scheme works perfectly. It gives you the perfect amount of control to make you feel like you can fight back, but just little enough to make you feel absolutely helpless in a very tight situation. And in moments where the game wants that, it works beautifully. But later on in the game, it throws stupid third-person shooter quirks at you and expects a solid action title. The worst of it comes down to the last few chapters, where it tries to be a cover-based shooter, but it feels absolutely stiff and terrible.
But the handicap that the game forces you to have is the majority of where the challenge stems come from.
And to its credit, when the game does that, it works really well. It has its moments of very tense action that really make me enjoy this game. But when it's just a shitty action game, I want to do nothing but get to the next cutscene so I can take a break. Oh, what the fuck?
QuickTime events. Oh god, I love these things. I like what I like. One of the things I actually enjoy are the QuickTime events. A lot of players hate the unpredictable and unfair advantage that these QuickTime events deliver, but for me, it keeps me paying attention during the cutscenes. I love the feeling of the QuickTime events, and the feeling of suspense, and that's exactly what these events in the game deliver to me as a player.
To me, QuickTime events are really a hit or miss in the game. And in this game, I feel they're a complete miss. They completely slow down the game. Cutscenes should be little rewards after a grueling fight, not a pop quiz to make sure you're paying attention. Resident Evil 4 had this same problem. They just don't really work well in Resident Evil. When the QuickTime events are interwoven into the gameplay, oh, they work fine. It's only the cutscene ones that really annoy me.
Going back to the game's actual style, it has a really heavy co-op focus, which means requiring Chris and Sheva to always be together to continue.
When you actually have a friend to play with you, it's a very fun game. And I'm not just saying that because I have a Let's Play out.
And he is not just saying that because he doesn't have friends to play with.
Hey! This game can invoke those let's be an asshole moments that make gaming with friends fun. And this game is best if you play together. Partly because the Sheva AI is just dumber than doornails.
I don't know about that.
Fun hater!
The game itself can be bogged down. Overall, it's pretty fun, but many elements slow down because now you have to rely on your partner. One example is the ammo sharing. It gets so tedious actually doing it. But co-op is optional, and when doing single player, Sheva herself is pretty self-sufficient.
Another multiplayer mode in this game is called Mercenaries. It's pretty much just your standard horde mode, and like I said earlier, the combat I feel is the worst part of the game. So it's enjoyable if you like the slow, monotonous task that a killfest like this forces you to do. So yeah, gameplay's a mixed bag.
There are two story-driven DLC packs, Lost in Nightmares and Desperate Escape. Lost in Nightmares takes place during the flashbacks of Chris and Jill on the journey to fight Wesker before Resident Evil 5 even happens. It takes you back to the original Resident Evil. It's done at a much slower pace with dark, small environments and a lot of puzzles. One of the reasons why I really enjoyed this one over Desperate Escape is because it reminded me so much of Resident Evil 4. You start off in a creepy mansion, not to mention that this is taking place at night, and you're basically trying to uncover anything you can find about Oswald Spencer, Umbrella's founder. As we mentioned earlier, most of Resident Evil 5 requires both Chris and Sheva to be together at all times because of its gameplay style. This is not true in Lost in Nightmares. It can still be played as co-op, but there are numerous parts where you are by yourself and cannot depend on your partner. The scariest part where this happens is when you fall down into the mansion's sewer section and all your weapons, yes, your guns, everything, are completely stripped from you and your partner is on the opposite side of the map. Not to mention, there are giant axe-murdering monsters that if you run too fast will hear your footsteps in the water and come after you. And let me tell you, they are terrifying. This whole DLC is a giant puzzle. The only way to kill these enemies is to drop floors on them by using the crates hidden in different parts of the map while your partner leads the monsters into the trap. Once you kill all of them and gather the pieces into the dial, you unlock the elevator to take you up to the level where you find Spencer. However, he is not alone. This DLC ends where Chris's personal side of the story in Resident Evil 5 begins. The other DLC is Desperate Escape. This takes place after saving Jill from Wesker's mind control and shows how Jill and Josh escape while Chris and Sheva chase Wesker. It is way more action-based than Lost in Nightmares. The gameplay atmosphere is nearly the same as Resident Evil 5 itself, seeing as it is just an alternate story route through another of the game's main characters. The final battle on the rooftop of this game is basically like Mercenaries. You have to hold out until Josh's friend, Doug, comes to pick you up in the chopper. What I didn't like about this is that it was just too long. The infected literally never stop, and we mustn't forget the good old tradition of killing off every chopper pilot in Resident Evil. Recommending either of these DLC packs really depends on what you're looking for. Lost in Nightmares is more of a blast from the past and will make you feel like you're playing more of a Resident Evil themed game. Desperate Escape, however, is just like Resident Evil 5 since it's literally just another story from the game. So it really depends on what you want. If you like Resident Evil 5, go Desperate Escape. If you want Lost in Nightmares or a better Resident Evil game feel that RE5 kind of failed to deliver, then go with that one. I like both of them. You gonna chime in at all?
Nope.
Why not?
Haven't played them. Never really cared enough to buy them.
Aren't you going to Let's Play them anyway?
You shut the fuck up. Honestly, this game is a mixed bag. Where Resident Evil 4 was a masterpiece, this game tries to do a lot different. And honestly, I respect it a lot for doing that. It just doesn't do it well. It tried to take the RE4 formula and mix it up, and in doing so, loses what made that game so magical. As the game goes on, it cannot tell if it wants to be a tense survival horror game or a poor man's Gears of War. The story itself is boring until this chicken shit dies, but it immediately becomes super fun the instant the story gets its focus on Wesker. Overall, after playing it twice, playing it with someone was much more enjoyable than playing alone. Single player, this game can seem like a chore at times, but the co-op really makes it a blast to play. Honestly, I can't really recommend this game unless you have someone else who also owns it or is willing to play the entire thing with you. I've seen it for as little as $15 new at a 7-11, or if you're a PC gamer, it's only $20 on Steam. Hell, if you go into GameStop, I've seen it for about $6 or $7. This game is very cheap. Resident Evil as a series itself completely baffles me. But I will say that with everything carrying the Resident Evil logo, this isn't the worst thing. What about you, Amy? What'd you think of this?
I enjoy playing the game, which I did through every difficulty. My favorite chapter is definitely Chapter 5-3, when Chris and Sheva encounter Jill and Wesker for the first time and battle for the first time. This chapter, though, was pretty much the only one I really thoroughly enjoyed. Unlike Resident Evil 4, I can never put that game down and still play it at least a couple times a year to this day. And I gotta say, other than this review, I haven't actually played Resident Evil 5 since 2011 when I completed all the achievements. It just wasn't the type of game that made me want to go back and replay it over and over like Resident Evil 4.
Well, that happened. Thanks for all your help, Amy.
No problem. Make sure you guys check out the Let's Play of Resident Evil 5 by Jake and Leo. It's pretty entertaining to watch.